the military heart of the Nazi war machine.
This bunker was Hitler's nerve center.
From the depths of the Führer bunker, where Adolf Hitler spent his final frantic days, to the imposing government buildings that once housed the Nazi regime, the architectural legacy of one of history's most notorious figures still looms large. Today, these structures stand as eerie remnants of a dark past, repurposed for modern life. This is what became of the largest Nazi buildings in Germany. Number 13. Prora, seaside resort on Rügen Island. First up, we've got the Prora, aka the Colossus of Prora. Built between 1936 and 1939 for the National Socialist organization Strength Through Joy. Located in Binz on the island of Rügen, Germany, the complex consisted of 8 identical buildings, each of which was 4.5 kilometers in length and made for a pretty view along the beach. Initially, the buildings were meant to be used as a holiday resort, which made sense given their location. They were set to attract quite the crowd, with a mind-blowing capacity to house 20,000 people. But then, the Germans took over, and the construction was never completed. So the military ended up using it as barracks. After the war, the Soviet army ended up doing the same thing as the Nazis before them. And after them came the East German Volksarmee and the German Bundeswehr. But things changed after the Berlin Wall was taken down. That's when the authorities ended up listing it as a historical site, and the buildings were turned into museums and art studios. However, with time, the ridiculously long structures, which were considered the longest in the world, broke down, and today they stretch across 3 kilometers, which is still pretty impressive. In 2004, the structure was converted into a luxurious residential and hotel complex. And if you feel like spending a night where the Nazis once paraded around, you can for the small price of $300 per night. Number 12. Berghof, Obersalzberg. Next up is the private residence of Adolf Hitler, aka the Berghof. Located in the Obersalzberg of the Bavarian Alps near Berchtesgaden, Bavaria, this was the German dictator's second favorite place, earning it the nickname the Eagle's Nest. We'll get to the first one in a while. While Hitler may have had some memories at his private residence, from 1933 onwards, it was used as a political headquarters. He got the keys to the building from Haus Wachenfeld in 1933 and made it his own. And it's obvious why he chose it. It was located 120 kilometers southeast of Munich, in a totally secluded place, making sure no spies could eavesdrop on the dictator's plans to end the lives of thousands. In fact, this is where Hitler made important decisions like the annexation of Austria and the invasion of Poland. The building was destroyed during World War II, and the ruins were eventually demolished in 1952 by the Bavarian government. They didn't want it to become a shrine, but the part of the site that's still standing now houses the Documentation Zentrum Obersalzberg, a permanent exhibition on National Socialism. And the only thing you can find of the past structure is some remnants of the house and its underground bunker system. In fact, you can even explore the extensive bunker system, or what's left of it anyway. Number 11. Wolf's Lair. Next up is, of course, Hitler's favorite place, the Wolf's Lair.
The military heart of the Nazi war machine.
This bunker was Hitler's nerve center.
This served as the German dictator's first Eastern Front military headquarters during the Second World War. And once again, it's kinda obvious why Hitler took a liking to it. It's located in the middle of nowhere. Well, not exactly. It's actually located in the Masurian woods near the village of Görlitz, which puts it about 8 kilometers away from the east of Rastenburg. a small East Prussian town that most folks know as Kętrzyn in Poland these days. Hitler got his name on the property pages for the site back in the late 1940s as part of his preparations for Operation Barbarossa. But construction didn't begin until 1941. Once everything was done, Hitler ended up spending 800 days at the lair during the war. And why wouldn't he? The lair was built like a fortress, with 50 bunkers and 70 buildings. More importantly, the entire place was surrounded by 3 security zones, with SS units patrolling every zone. Even a cat couldn't make its way in if it wanted to. And yet, for some reason, this is also the same place where Hitler came this close to losing his life, aka the July 20th plot assassination attempt by Klaus von Stauffenberg in 1944. As for what remains of the structure today, well, the Germans didn't leave us with much since they blew up the whole complex on their way out in 1945. The government did have to go through the hassle of removing over 54,000 landmines from the area, but the then Poland government couldn't be bothered to do anything else. However, in the 1990s, the site was finally recognized as a historical tourist attraction, and whatever is left of the infamous lair has been preserved. There are the bunkers used by German dignitaries, like the Goering bunker. You can drop by the site during a tour along with the other 300,000 visitors who make their way to the site every year. It's a historical visit that'll blow your mind, but not as much as this next one. Number 10. Zeppelin Tribune, Reichsparteitagsgelände in Nuremberg. Expanding over 11 square kilometers in the southeast of Nuremberg, Germany, the Zeppelin Tribune is really something to see. And if there's one thing that comes to mind when you lay on a structure this wide, it's rallies, which is exactly what it was used for. Years ago on this field, Hitler addressed large crowds. His speeches were made more dramatic by the Cathedral of Light effect, something that the field was known for because of the searchlights lighting up the sky. And get this, the field had the capacity to accommodate over 300,000 people. Other than that, the Zeppelin Tribune was also used for parades by the Wehrmacht and the German Labor Service. Plans for the massive grounds were designed by Hitler's then-favorite architect, Albert Speer. Just to be clear, the rally grounds are massive. They include the Luitpold Arena, a deployment area, the Luitpold Hall, aka the Old Congress Hall, the Neue Kongresshalle, aka the New Congress Hall, and the Zeppelinfeld, another deployment area. There were also plans for a third expansive space, Märzfeld, but those never came to light, and the site was later destroyed. Hitler also planned to construct the Deutsche Stadion, one of the largest sports stadiums in the world. Unfortunately, for him, the workers were never able to move past the foundations, and Hitler had to give up that dream. And let's not forget the Grosse Strasse, a parade road which was never used. After the war, the site was initially used by the U.S. Army as a sports field, and it has since fallen into disrepair. Since 1947, the grounds have served as a venue for the annual Norrisring Speed Weekend Motorsport Festival, as well as the Rock im Park Rock Festival since 2004. However, there's good news for historians. Restoration efforts have been approved since then. According to reports, there are plans to turn it into a memorial and educational site about National Socialism and its propaganda techniques, costing over $85 million. And it kinda makes sense, since before Hitler came along, the grounds served as a sports and leisure park in the 1920s. Number 9. Nuremberg Congress Hall. On that note, there's one structure that we need to talk about separately located within the Nazi Party rally grounds, and that's the Nuremberg Congress Hall. And the reason behind that is because it's regarded as one of the largest architectural projects built under the Nazi regime. Ludwig and Franz Ruff were the ones who worked on the designs for the Congress Hall, and they took inspiration from the Colosseum in Rome. It's kinda obvious since the building features a U-shaped structure with outer walls towering at a mind-blowing height of 39 meters. And get this, Hitler planned the walls to be 70 meters tall initially, but his grand dreams were never realized. What's more, he wanted the buildings to measure 250 meters in diameter. Still, the 118,000 square meter floor space does leave jaws on the floors. And as with most of the buildings Hitler approved, the leader of the Nazi Party wanted to use the Congress Hall to host grand party events and basically tell the world to think twice before butting heads with them. However, World War II kinda put Hitler's plans on hold as it broke out in 1939. After the war, the Congress Hall was initially used by the Americans as a food storage facility and later by the Quai Versant for warehousing. The government recognized it as a historical monument in 1973, and it is currently being transformed into an opera house and a venue for the State Theater, though this is controversial due to the building's Nazi history. Number 8. Sophienpalais, Hamburg. Built in 1935 in a neoclassical style as the General Command headquarters of the Wehrmacht, you can't leave out Sophienpalais while talking about historical Nazi buildings. Constructed as a three-winged complex with a central section, the Nazi HQ was designed by Distel and Grubitz. After the war, the building fell into the hands of the Bundeswehr, who used it for military purposes from 1956 to 2005. After that, the building was sold off. The Nazi headquarters has since then been converted into an exclusive residential building with 105 luxury apartments. The front facade remains in its original military style, and a memorial plaque has been added to remember its history. The authorities managed to make 105 condominiums, which were put up for sale with price tags ranging from 5,000 euros for small apartments and 14,000 euros per square meter for penthouses. Number 7. Hermann Göring Works, Salzgitter, Lower Saxony. The Hermann Göring Works, aka the Reichswerke. Hermann Göring was Hitler's biggest accomplishment. Located in Reichswerke. Hermann Göring, the industrial complex, was constructed back in 1937 to boost the country's iron ore production. And to be fair, Hitler was an opportunist, dedicated to making the most of his resources, since private steel mills in Salzgitter didn't exactly think it was a moneymaker. But Hitler was only focused on strengthening his troops during the World War looming over his head. And that's why, in true German dictator fashion, he employed thousands of forced laborers and concentration camp prisoners under harsh conditions. After the war, the Allied forces took control of the complex, and they shut down the operation. By 1946, they were dismantling the plant, and by 1953, most of the original structure had been destroyed. However, in 1954, the government changed its mind about the site and approved plans for a heavy medium plate mill. The steelworks are now owned by Salzgitter AG, one of the biggest steel manufacturers in Europe. So, it's still an industrial complex without any of the scary Nazi rules. Employees work under modern labor contracts with benefits like 35-hour work weeks, 30 days of vacation annually, and generous holiday bonuses. Number 6. Führerbau, Munich. The Führerbau in Munich is where Hitler went to wind down. Even the German dictator needed some time off after wreaking havoc. He even had his favorite architect, Paul Ludwig Trost, come up with the plans for the building in 1931. But that's not all that the building was used for. In September 1938, it housed the gathering of some great leaders for the signing of a disappointing international deal, the Munich Agreement. France and Britain believed that the deal would put them one step closer to peace, but that's not what happened. Still, you'll find a memorial written in German, Czech, and Slovak, commemorating the moment. Now, head inside the building, and you'll find the room where Hitler and Neville Chamberlain signed the agreement, preserved in perfect condition. After the Germans' defeat, the U.S. Armed Forces took over Führerbau and the Nazi administrative building right beside it as the Zentrale Sammelstelle, aka the Central Collecting Pointing. These two buildings were used to store the art stolen by the Nazis from all over Europe. However, since then, the building has been repurposed to house the University of Music and Performing Arts Munich. Number 5. Flak Towers. Next up are the Flak Towers. At first glance, these towers look like they were built to withstand the strongest of blasts, which is exactly the case. Made out of concrete, these structures were used for anti-aircraft defense. Each tower was equipped with a radar dish that could be retracted behind a steel dome and thick concrete for protection. What's more, the towers also served as civilian shelters during the unforgiving raids in Austria and Germany. And since they were so important in the war, Hitler didn't hesitate to change up the German national rail schedule to make sure all the concrete, timber, and steel reached the construction sites on time. 3 such structures were built in Berlin, out of which 2 survived the war and are still standing tall today. 3 towers were also constructed in Vienna, out of which you'll only find the one near the Obere Augartenstrasse, as well as the L Tower today. There are also 2 flak towers in Hamburg, but they've been partly destroyed. Some of these lasting towers have been repurposed into nightclubs, restaurants, and music shops. However, some of them were simply abandoned since the government didn't think it was worth it to open their wallets to destroy some indestructible buildings. Number 4. NS Ordensburgen. Out of all the buildings that Hitler constructed during his time, the NS Ordensburgen, aka the Nazi Order castles, is perhaps the most intriguing. Think of them as grim monuments to the architectural ambition of the Third Reich. These colossi began construction in 1936, but were not completed until 1939. They were not houses or buildings, but physical manifestations of the Nazi ideology. The Ordensburgen was architecturally a combination of Nordic and functional styles and modern efficiency. What's more, the enormous size, covered with huge areas of glass and concrete, was meant to overwhelm and inspire awe. The buildings, often embedded in dramatic natural settings, showcased a connection to the German Volk and the natural world. One of the main characteristics of the Ordensburgen architecture was a strong adoption of open, communal spaces. Enormous assembly halls and dining rooms were at the heart of the design for the Ordensburgen, presenting the Nazi obsession with mass gatherings and collective experience. All this was meant to inculcate in the cadets a spirit of unity and common purpose, which was the true reason behind their construction. You see, these were not mere universities, but centers of indoctrination to turn young men into fanatical followers of the regime. The carefully prepared environment, coupled with a rigorous training regime, was designed to create an elite imbued with Nazi ideology. The power-hungry dictator only wanted the smartest and most dedicated individuals to work alongside him and take his position. And so 3 of these remote castle-like schools were constructed. The authorities took in vetted candidates between the ages of 25 and 30 who were physically and mentally fit, and more importantly, of pure blood. One of the castles, Ordensburg Sonthofen, was located in Allgäu, while the other 2 were Vogelsang in Eifel and Krossensee in Pomerania. The Krossensee is currently under the Polish Army. Meanwhile, Sonthofen serves as the military barracks for the Bundeswehr. Out of the 3, Vogelsang is the only one open to the public, serving as an institute for education. Number 3. Ministry of Aviation, Berlin. Before it was known as the Ministry of Aviation, the building you see before you was the Detlev Rohwedder House, and it was truly something. And why wouldn't it be? When the ribbon was cut in 1936, it was the largest office space in the world. In fact, The exact words they used to describe the massive structure were that it was constructed in the typical style of National Socialist intimidation architecture. Layout-wise, the structure featured a symmetrical design with 2 wings and 2 large inner courtyards. But what was really impressive was the floor area of 112,000 square meters and 2,100 offices. And Hitler can thank Ernst Zagabiel for that one, the architect who came up with the plans for the building. He's the same architect who worked on the reconstruction of the Tempelhof Airport. Surprisingly, the building remained unscathed during World War II, which is really saying something, since most of the buildings that Hitler put his heart and soul into were destroyed, or at least damaged. After the war, the Soviet military took control of the building and used it for administrative purposes until 1948. After 1949, the building served as the House of Ministries of the German Democratic Republic. And then, after 1990, the building fell into the hands of the Berlin branches of the German Finance Ministry and the Federal Court of Auditors. Since 1999, the Detlev Rohwedder House has been serving as the head office of the German Finance Ministry, and it doesn't look like they have any plans of leaving the space anytime soon. Number 2. Karaman Submarine Base, Lorient. The Karaman Submarine Base in Lorient, France, is no ordinary building. Constructed by the Germans between 1941 and 1943, this was actually a big concrete fortress aimed at protecting special underwater boats called U-boats during a massive war. Think of a building that takes up a whole city block. That is what Karaman is like. In reality, it features 3 huge sections, each large enough to hold a dozen submarines simultaneously. Think like 12. The walls are very thick, too, about as thick as 3 big doors stacked on top of each other. Why did the Germans build such a gigantic hide-and-seek location for some submarines? Well, the submarines were really important for that war, and the Germans just needed a safe place to put them so as not to be attacked. It was like an underwater secret boat garage. Building it wasn't very easy, though. It required so much time and hard work, especially with the war going on. But they finished it, and it was so strong that even bombs couldn't break it. Plans for the structure were first brought up when Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz felt like he needed a base of operations on the French shores of the Atlantic Ocean in 1940. And man, were they proud of it, because the Allied forces had a hard time taking this one back from the Germans. Until May 1945, German forces inside the structure refused to give in, even as American troops surrounded them on all sides. And when they were left with no choice, the Americans made the decision to reduce the neighboring town of Lorient to rubble. Though a ruthless move, one that lacked humanity, it was a strategic ploy for the military, since this way the Americans were able to cut off the base's supply lines. Following the liberation of France, the base fell into the hands of the French Navy, and they renamed it Base Ingénieur General Stoskov, a tribute to Jacques Stoskov, who, for those of you who don't know, was an Alsatian German working as the French's inside man on the project. Unfortunately, as great as the structure is, the French abandoned it in 1997. Today, this giant submarine castle no longer sees use in war. Actually, it is one of the places that brings in tourists to learn some history. Number 1. Reichssportfeld. Formerly known as the Reichssportfeld in Berlin, the stadium was built especially for the 1936 Olympic Games. But that didn't mean Hitler didn't use it for spreading Nazi ideology. The center stage of this complex, known as the Olympiastadion, was crafted by Werner March. What's more, the magnanimous scale and neoclassical style depicted former Nazi imperialist craftsmanship, something that's long gone since the stadium had been revamped and repurposed. The main stadium also included other facilities like the Mayfield, which was an open space capable of holding 110,000 spectators. That doesn't include the open-air amphitheater known as the Wadboon, which was intended for political rallies and demonstrations. The Reichssportfeld's construction started in 1934 and was completed right in time for the 1936 Olympics. To give a bit more oomph to the scale of the Oval Olympiastadion, the field was sunken 12 meters below ground level. This former piece of Nazi architecture also holds some esteemed history. Jesse Owens, the African-American track and field athlete, managed to procure 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympics, pretty much threatening Hitler's ideology of Aryan supremacy. Today, the Olympiastadion has been repurposed with a tinge of modernity and is used for a variety of sporting events and concerts. It's home to the football team Hertha BSC and has been home to a few international football matches such as the 2006 FIFA World Cup and the UEFA Champions League final. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.